Hello and welcome. Thanks for tuning in for the very first episode of our new limited series podcast for the Stoke-on-Trent Community of Practice, which we have called A Shock to the System. I'm Lee Dale, Community Recovery Coordinator for Changing Futures.
And I'm Sophia Federovich, the Learning Lead for Stoke-on-Trent Community of Practice. Across this series, we'll be joined by some inspiring guests to have honest conversations as we shine a light on the challenges in practice for people working in the multiple disadvantage field.
A community of practice brings people together to learn, to reflect and act. Ours unites frontline workers, people with lived experience and others across health, social care, housing and the voluntary sector, all focused on improving support for people experiencing homelessness, substance use, domestic abuse, health challenges or involvement with the criminal justice system.
We're here to ask tough questions, challenge assumptions and share real stories about what works and what doesn't work. Our aim is to shift practice to spark ideas, action and solidarity, whether you're a practitioner, a policy maker or someone currently navigating support.
And to help us unpack all of that, we're happy to be joined by this week's guests, two seasoned change makers, Julian Corner and Myron Rogers. Welcome to A Shock to the System. It's great to have you with us. To kick things off, Julian, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Julian Corner. I've been the Chief Executive of an organisation called Lankelly Chase for nearly 15 years now. Lankelly Chase is a charitable foundation. We give grants, money to other charities to help them do their work. And yeah, we've been focused on system change, particularly in the territory of multiple disadvantages for most of that time.
And Myron, thank you for joining us today. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Lee. It's a real honor to be here, Lee and Sophia, to see you. I guess people would know me as an expert in systems change and systems theory and the application of systems theory to complex change. I would say that I'm not actually an expert. I don't really know that much. I know more than a lot of people, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the change that I'm involved in works. But I've worked across industries, across sectors, public and private, for actually 50 years at this point. I'm miraculously, I look much younger. And I'm also a trustee of Lankelly Chase, which is how I know Julian. And we have been, really trying very hard to do well documented and really understood systems change for a good long time. But it's great to be here.
Thank you.
So thanks for introducing yourselves, guys. We're excited to explore systems change with you. But before we dive into that, we're going to check in with our roving reporter, Jason, who has been spending time at the community of practice meetings to find out what systems change means to our community of practice members.
Hi, I'm Jason. I'm here at the Communities of Practice for Systems of Change, where we've been chatting to COP members about that very subject. What does systems change mean to you?
For me, systems change is about the whole system. It's not only about the parts of the system that are written down in policies and procedures and strategies and service specifications, but it's also, and I think crucially, about the way people at the front line work with each other, about their attitudes and values, about how those attitudes and values drive the decisions that they make in those grey areas, particularly between what the policies say, what the eligibility criteria say. Life is much more complex than you can capture in those kinds of documents. So people's attitudes and values and the culture and the way the tools that they use in their work are structured is all vital, really, to making the system work in the way it was intended.
What does systems change mean to you?
Systems change means to me about identifying local barriers, local challenges that we might be facing in the system, and then looking about ways on how we can overcome them, what solutions have we got with the resources that we have available. Mainly for me, it's identifying challenges and barriers, and then what do we put in place to overcome them.
What does systems change mean to you?
It's about identifying those things that work and make a difference, and encouraging all partners to work in that way and to move away from perhaps the way they've done things traditionally to the things that prove effective. I think the key issue for me is to move away from simply doing things right to doing the right things.
How can people in your role support systems change?
I think the key thing is to keep talking about culture, keep talking about values, keep talking about trauma-informed and sensitive ways of that work can be delivered, about non-judgmentalism in the work that we all do at the front line, and to be advocating for those things, for rights-based approaches, to try and get away from this idea that people are making a lifestyle choice if they're homeless, or if they've got addictions, or if they're experienced in the justice system. People still need help and support, and the best way to get to the right outcome, both for those individuals and for the rest of the community, is by providing the help and support that they need.
How can people in your role support systems change?
For me, it's about flexibility, it's about being adaptable, it's looking about what processes we may have in place already that may not be working for the current climate and what we may be facing. It's about good networking, good relationships, it's about coming together to identify challenges that we all may be experiencing, and then what needs to change in the system to better suit our clients that we're working with.
Can people in your role support systems change?
Well, I think it's about encouraging the leaders of the different departments, organisations and agencies to move away from the traditional approaches and to recognise that actually working in different ways, predominantly in partnership with others, will invariably deliver better outcomes than doing things on their own, because no one can do everything, but everyone can do something.
Well, that's all from me here at the Communities of Practice event. However, I'll be bringing you more from the COP members over the rest of the series. You take care now.
Thanks, Jason. So, Myron, let's start off. What does systems change mean to you?
Oh my God. This is a hard question. I was once asked a question by Darren, actually, which is, how do you think social change happens? Which immediately floored me. I had no answer to this. And it's a difficult one to answer. I would say that my work is really about how to restore people's individual and collective power to make choices and to build a system, whatever that means, a system that really is in service to them, in service to the lives that they lead, the quality that they lead. So that's really where the focus of my work is. It gets kind of sexy when we begin talking about the dynamics of systems, and they're really, they're quite impressive and things that you really have to work with carefully, but they also can be distracting, right? There's a real issue about, for me, in systems change, about how people form communities. And so certainly you all, expert citizens in the community of practice that you're doing, you think of the community of practice as a real community, and what does that mean? And if people are marginalized by having power differences within the group that they're engaged in, how do you deal with those issues? How do you bring those into the fore? And I don't know if that helps. I could go on this for a long time, but there's a lot of questions here.
Thank you for that. Before we go on, though, would we like to bring in Julian and ask you, what does systems change mean to you?
Well, its meaning for me has evolved over time. So probably, I actually began my career in the civil service, and at that time it was probably about how services need to change, and the practices of services, the rules governing services. Then it probably turned into the quality of our relationships with each other, because a system is made up of lots of different parts. Those parts interrelate somehow, most obviously through human beings. And so moving from transactional to relational interactions. I think these days, having seen many attempts to change systems, seeing them change temporarily maybe, and then fall back to their previous ways, I've got to the point where I'm trying to look at what are the, let's say, bigger systems which are governing and creating the conditions for those smaller systems to operate. And so then you're looking at, you know, the operation not just of policy, but of the economy, the norms that govern our society, the kind of grandfather of all systems, capitalism, and how capitalism shapes not just our lives, but our mindsets and the way that we relate to each other. So for me, system change is at multiple levels. All of them are important. All of them have to be worked on and are valid, but they all relate to each other. So I guess these days I'm trying to understand not just, let's say, the horizontal change in one system, but the vertical change as in the interaction between what system change nerds call nested systems, one system inside, you know, like a Russian doll, one system inside another.
Thank you. So a lot of the members of our community practice are frontline practitioners and are working on the front line, and we often see fear and intrepidation when we mention systems change. Does it have to be scary for frontline practitioners, and what role do they play in systems change? Myron, to you.
Well, no, it doesn't have to be scary. It shouldn't be. I mean, that certainly, you know, the emotional content of this and the quality of relationships that Julian mentioned, you know, that really has a lot to play with what's going on in the field, people who are on the front line. I want to come back to this, you know, building community, because this is, you know, one of the ways that this happens. One of the ways that you do away with fear in the organization is by you know, people coming together in a relationship that is, you know, one that honors one another, one that seeks to liberate the information, experience, and wisdom that any group of people have, any individual has, and apply it to what it is they're doing. Yeah, I mean, fear in any of its form produces, you know, outcomes that you don't really want generally. It's the unintended consequences of the change that you're engaged in. And again, you know, for me, it's that quality of relationship, how we come together, how it is we get clear about what it is we're trying to do for and with one another. I have certain kinds of little statements that are helpful. One is the process you use to get to the future is the future you get. And you know, if people really understood that, they'd look carefully at what's going on between us right now, what's arising between us right at this moment, that's, you know, giving birth to something that looks like the future we're trying to create or doesn't. So, I mean, those simple conversations, I call it kind of a discipline, a dialogic discipline of coming together regularly and saying, look, this is what we just did. I think it looks like the future. Do you? And, you know, you say no. So we have a conversation there, and we're trying to get clear and clearer about what it is we're trying to do and the way in which we need to do it.
What are your thoughts, Julian?
I mean, I think some of the fear comes from an experience of power inequality, which Myron's already alluded to. So I totally support Myron's analysis of why community is needed, because, you know, strength in numbers, and that thing of, am I going mad, or is it the system? You know, so finding people who you can share experiences with and to reassure you that no, it's not you, something else is going on here, and then the strength in numbers in terms of building a collective analysis feels really important, and then that tipping over into collective action. But I think also a lot of the, you know, as I alluded to the power inequality, a lot of the fear comes from the kind of the bite back, or the consequences or the repercussions of questioning how things are done. And I think that other than just challenging the system, which is always probably better done collectively. The other thing is that we're in this weird world where you either get punished for not following the rules of the system, or you get celebrated for being an innovator and a trailblazer. And so I think one of the other things is that some of the people who we most look to and celebrate are those who have questioned the system, have actually understood that there are better ways of doing it, and have tried to shape practice which responds to the reality that they're seeing on the ground, not the rules that they've been given to them from above. But that does take bravery, and it does take support. So it doesn't really work when the person thinks, I'm just going to, basically put on my crash helmet and run at the problem. You need people around you to support you to hold that, because burnout is real for those who try and do something different. But also, you can get a bit of a messiah complex as well for those who think that the system is wrong, I have found the answer. So you need people around you to sort of support you to be able to see yourself in the midst of that. But I think the other bit about the power inequality is there's always a bit of a sense that somewhere someone else has the answer, someone else is controlling the system, someone else's analysis is more intellectual or better than mine. I don't understand this system change language. So if I think that the system is wrong, I've now got to try and use this language that other people are better at. Actually, frontline practitioners are the ones who actually understand what the issues are, have the analysis of what is wrong and what needs to shift. And usually those decision makers on high, who are a long way from the ground, are making most of it up and are the most rule-bound of all people, because they're not doing the actual work, so they're reliant on the rules. And so there is something about the courage that comes from knowing, no, I am actually the expert in how the system runs. I am a system leader, not the leader of this council or trust or whatever, who has a lot of power, but actually, as we all know, doesn't have very much power. Try running a large organization, you'll find that you don't have much power. So they're kind of using what little power they have to try and focus on the rules of the system and keep everything safe. And so, which isn't to denigrate those people, because they're just trying to do their job. They themselves are products of the system, so it's not personal. But what I'm trying to say is like everyone's feeling fear because the fear comes from not feeling like you're in control. Nobody feels like they're in control of the system. It just gets expressed in different ways.
Thank you. So it sounds to me like frontline practitioners are really important. They've got a really important role in terms of pushing forward with systems change. Thank you.
So I suppose I'm going to drill down a little bit into that. Can you talk to me a little bit about what practitioners can do in their everyday lives to support systems change? I love that we've already touched on joining the community of practice. Is there anything else?
I'm going to go back actually to, this might be shifting the question a little, something Julian said. I, for a very long time, have been very opposed to the conclusion that in order to operate well in the system, you have to be courageous. Because I don't want organizations or my organizational life or my community life to require courage for me to do the right thing. So then that leaves this big question about what do you do together? The drilling down in this, what do you do together to actually create a system that lives by integrity, that honors one another, that can manage power in a way that power is passed around as a resource for people to share and to use in different ways. So, that's one thing. And another thing that Julian brought up, I just want to bring back. The most ridiculous thing happened yesterday, the Health Service Journal. There was a headline in the Health Service Journal, which this is a journal about for the NHS and NHS employees and whatnot. there was a headline in it that 21 of the integrated care systems that are out there, they're going to rescind the middle manager's raise, 3% pay raise. And the reason is that some ministers wanted a harder regime of carrot and stick, right? Now, it's a remarkable thing because all the evidence for 50 years probably of research on carrot and stick is that it doesn't work, right? You always get something other than what you really intended when you're trying to lead people through that way of leading in that. So, that is an immediate example of some of what Julian was talking about, I think. What?
Julian, do you have any thoughts?
So this is how do practitioners contribute to system change?
In their day-to-day.
In their day-to-day, yeah. So there are, when you start in any role, we have this thing called induction. And the induction is to help the individual understand the rules of the system that they are moving into. And all roles should have that. A good induction helps you to understand why do things happen here in the way that they happen. And I guess most of us interpret that as at the end of this induction, will be competent in these rules, be able to enact them, and I will be rewarded for that, or promoted, or I will be safe in my role. But above all, I'll be deemed to be competent. And we all know that people are measured in terms of their competences, and their competences in relation to the rules that have been set for them. And I think and what is missing from that is critical thinking, the ability to understand these rules and to enact them, but also to have a part of your brain that is continually questioning, is this the right thing to be doing? Because when you're face to face with another human being, do these rules that this institution expects of me actually reflect the reality of this exchange, this value that has been created between me and another human? And so for frontline practitioners, I think that entering into practices that enable you to critically reflect on what you are in, and that might be clinical supervision, or all the way through to communities of practice. It might even be something as simple as keeping a diary of day-to-day experiences that enable you to track over time whether you are showing up with integrity and whether you're in integrity with your environment. Because what many people reflect on is, after 10, 20 years enacting these rules, you lose yourself. And the person who went into this work and fired with ideals can get lost in the midst of this, because systems are complex, the world is a scary place, and there are consequences for getting stuff wrong. And so I would say from the outset, have a intentional, clear strategy for how you reserve a part of yourself to reflect on the norms that you're part of, so that you don't find yourself ultimately leaving yourself at the door when you enter into your workplace.
Leaving yourself at the door is a brilliant line and painful. I mean, one of the things that I'd say about my experience of working in organizations is that the articulation of the rules of what we play by here is almost always a lie, right? It is not what we think it should be. And that, you know, I've jokingly, no one has ever taken me up on this, but my induction methodology is that you give a person a desk and 2 weeks, and then they come back to tell you what the rules are around here, right? Which is it's a whole different way, and it gets in some ways to what you're saying about reflective discipline or capability. And the, you know, the communities of practice are similarly, the work inside the community, the way the community works, ought to be fundamentally, you know, 90% of that work is just reflection about what are we doing? Does this make sense? Does this look like what we're trying to do? Does it support us? What's the quality of relationship that we're in with one another now, that we're in with the larger system? So yeah, there's also I was thinking about Berrett-Koehler, and this is a guy who he's in his 80s now. He's well known in the world of community practice, and he has a theory of power that's really powerful, a powerful theory of power. That is, there are 3 levels to power in a system. It's the top, the middle, and the bottom. And with each one of those, when you're in that role, certain behaviors come with it. And you know, immediately, you know, you're into the kinds of things that we're trying to undo here in the community of practice. And so the other issue is that, as Julian was saying about, you know, senior leaders, blaming them and whatnot, this theory says basically any one of us could be in any one of those positions at any one time. And so, you know, a top leader has to report to a board somehow and suddenly becomes a middle in that, right? And so there's this movement of power dynamics all around the system that, you know, is something to be really aware of. Where are we now in this? And one of the things about change agents, you know, people who are working in the field of change, is that they often see themselves as at the bottom. And, you know, how do you shift those things?
We've covered a lot of ground today. System change can be very complex, but understanding it is key to making a real difference. We hope the conversations have given you plenty to reflect on. A big thank you to our guests, Julian Corner and Myron Rogers, for sharing their thoughtful insights. It's been a real pleasure.
And thank you to the people and partners who make this podcast possible. Thank you to Changing Futures, the National Lottery Community Fund, and the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Next month, we'll be joined by Claire Ritchie and Darren Marinas to dive into the topic of stigmatising language in the sector. In the meantime, you can keep the conversation going by visiting the Expert Citizens website and going to the Community of Practice Resource Bank to find resources from our guests, the Stoke-on-Trent Community of Practice, and other brilliant resources to support you in creating your own little pocket of shocking the system.